I'm Dana Harris, editor of Strategic Projects, and today we're honored to have with us David Unn, AOL's president of media and studios. And his appearance as our keynote conversation is particularly noteworthy given where AOL was a year ago. At the time, it was still part of the Time Warner merger. Its spinoff wouldn't come for another couple of months, and I think it's fair to say that at the time it was unclear as to what its path to success would be. David came in March to oversee all AOL content. Like AOL CEO Tim Armstrong, David came from Google, where he oversaw business development and helped sign major media partnerships, including getting studios and record labels to sign content over to YouTube. And since then, a lot's happened at AOL, and I'm going to read this as a list just because it's long. Over the last 7.5 months, David has overseen the growth of local news service Patch, overseen the acquisitions of premier tech news blog TechCrunch, social media company Thing Labs, and video content syndication platform 5 Minute Media, revived AOL brand City's Best, and hired hundreds of writers and editors. And of course, we've all heard the rumor now that AOL is trying to assemble backing to buy Yahoo. And like I said, a year ago, a lot of this activity might have seemed unlikely or even impossible. Tell me about the decision-making that went into you leaving Google for AOL. What was your thought process?
Well, I should first qualify what you stated, which is all true, but it wasn't all me. There are certain things that you described that various colleagues have been involved in. But to answer your question, when I decided to come to AOL, I'd been watching the digital media space for a while, and the observation that I had, and I still have, is that you have media companies on one hand who are creating content and trying to create experiences for their audiences based on, at the end of the day, informed golden gut is what I would call it, where quality is really the main objective and giving great content experiences. And then on the other hand, at the other end of the spectrum, you have technology companies like the one I work for. And these are Facebooks, YouTubes, Googles of the world that are essentially platform companies. They don't own or produce content, and they're merely to provide services and then make a good business out of it. And there are very few companies today that really are reaping the best of both worlds by doing the best of both. And I saw and see in AOL a company that is equal parts media company and technology company that really understands the value of high quality content and a programmed experience, but knows how to leverage technology to gain efficiencies and to scale. So I thought it was a very unique opportunity, and it's proving to be a very interesting ride.
Well, I mean, for a long time, the popular wisdom is that content's king, and then the ad market crashed, and the reaction was, well, I mean, content's not king. So why did you still have faith in content?
Well, I think content has and still is king, and what I mean by that is that if you look at these technology companies that I described and consider them to be, say, the pipes of the internet, we believe that high-quality content is the water that should flow through all these pipes, and I've always thought as important as those pipes and distribution systems are, and by the way, AOL also has a distribution network itself, content is what brings it to life. We just completed some consumer research recently, and it turns out that more than half of the time spent online is spent consuming content. And when you look at the behaviors that are emerging now, it's like social networks, for example, and there are various studies out there, but the most popular activity on social networks is actually consuming content. In fact, in ratios of 2 times more than giving personal updates, for example, on what you're doing. So I've long felt that that content is actually the substance of what draws people there. Now, you want to program an experience with certain functionality and an experience around it that complements the content, but without content, you just don't have the experience. And ultimately, advertisers are looking for audiences that are engaged and associate the advertisers' brands and message with whatever experience they're having, and so content is key to that.
Well, when you did an interview with CNN Money recently, and you said your entire turnaround is hinged on content. We want to be the pipe to distribute the best, most compelling content on the web, which is a tall order, obviously, for any company. But is it possible to be the dominant content source, or is that really what you're looking for AOL? Are you the dominant content pipe or the premier source of content? How do you see AOL?
Well, I don't know about dominant, but what we know is that the majority of people on the web today, a vast majority, 70% plus, at the end of the day have a go-to list of sites. It's not unlike the TV world where, as we know, as the number of choices on your set-top boxes increased, the set of regular channels that you frequent has not actually grown proportionately, right? At some point it starts to get capped. And it's not dissimilar on the web. It turns out that 70% of the people on the web have about 20 or less websites that they go to regularly. And they swap out those 20 and in fact do a lot of sampling before they anoint a site as something that's in the go-to 20. But at the end of the day, there is this 20. And we believe that if you can become part of the regular viewing of online audiences, then there's a huge business and huge opportunities there. And so on one hand, it's great if you can enter into that list. On the other hand, it's a challenge because the choice, there's so much choice out there, and you have to keep yourself relevant and really focused on giving the best experience possible.
Give me a kind of your list of, like, say, the top 5 destinations on AOL right now. What would you say they are?
Well, I guess it really depends on the audience segment that you have, because when we say we're America Online, we really are America Online.
And you have, like, about how many sites is that? Because you've got 17 channels, right?
Well, we have it turns out dozens and dozens of sites, and one of the things that I've been doing is trying to organize ourselves around what we call networks, right? So the idea that you can organize various sites around certain categories. So in entertainment, for example, we have MoviePhone. A lot of people don't know that, but MoviePhone is celebrating its 20th anniversary this year. It's covering movies. We have AOL TV. We have Pop Eater, which is a celebrity site, and of course AOL Music, which has been as a long-established brand in the music space. So within music, there's a network, and then there's individual sites within it. But going back to your original question, one of the things that I didn't fully appreciate that I think always blows me away when I share it with people in the entertainment business is that AOL.com, which is our homepage, has 15 million unique visitors every day. So what that means is that at any given point in time during the day, we have as many or more people as do most television networks. And I think at AOL people knew that, but they didn't really realize it. So when you think about the AOL.coms of the world and the MoviePhones of the world and the MapQuests, which is another very popular big brand, and the fact that people still use a lot of our communication tools, whether it's mail or AIM, our chat. And then we have a technology offering called Engadget, which is a leader in its space for those who are focused on gadgets and devices. There's actually a very interesting portfolio of different sites for different folks. What we've done is we've focused on very clear priorities in the company. So in addition to sites, what I would say is we are very clear on the type of audiences that we want to reach out to. One is women, and has and will continue to be a very, very important part of our audience. The second are young influencers / technology as a category. So this is why we acquired TechCrunch. The third is multicultural. We've had Black voices and AOL Latino within the portfolio for a while, and they've done very well. And I think if you understand even a little bit about what's going on demographically in our country, you understand how these are must-have offerings, huge opportunities.
Well, what's interesting is what you're describing to me. I mean, I was an AOL user back in, what was it, like 94? And I remembering, back then with the walled garden concept, AOL was sort of like training wheels for the web. You weren't quite ready to go out into the great wide web yet, but you were kind of safe within the confines of all the different offerings on AOL. It sounds like in a way what you're offering now is sort of like a grown-up version of that you don't have the pay to get in as you did back then, but it's like you're trying to create a universe unto itself that AOL can satisfy.
To a certain extent, yeah, I think that's right. I mean, just consistent with what I just shared with you about the 20 sites that people tend to frequent, I think that's a reflection of the fact that there's so much choice and there's so much content out there. I don't think that people are are in need of content per se, but what they're in need of is content that speaks to them. And what we're trying to create at AOL are a series of sites and offerings that are curated, that are programmed, where we actually are doing the research and we actually are taking the time and the effort to, frankly, guess in some cases and back it up with research as to what will resonate with our audiences. And I think people appreciate that. We want to sort of take the work out of the internet for them. When we do research, and you go back, and perhaps some of you have experienced this, but the web in general can be a very cold, austere place, or very confusing or intimidating. It can take a lot of work. There's so many dials and knobs now that various companies offer, which on one hand is fantastic. On the other hand, it's just overwhelming. So what we're finding is that people actually appreciate when you go out there and say, you know what, sit back, we're going to give you some choice for sure, but we're going to make some educated guesses. And we're going to allow you also to have a relationship with us to tell us what you like.
So I'm going to ask the audience really quickly, how many of you guys are readers of TechCrunch? Okay, interesting. I have a lot of tech friends who will be very upset with me if I didn't ask this question. What is your integration strategy for TechCrunch? Just briefly, for those who don't know, it's the premier news blog for the technology industry. And they just purchased the site, what was it, about a month ago, month and a half ago?
A few weeks ago, yeah.
Yeah.
Our integration plan is, frankly, not to screw it up. I think everyone's seen this movie before, and you know how it ends for a lot of companies, where even the most well-intentioned large companies come in and they say, hey, we're here to the rescue, and here's all this process and rules and things that you don't like or understand and, frankly, never had in the first place, and were never part of the reason why you got successful. So what we're trying to do is make sure that they can continue to run and do the things that have made them who they are, and then figure out ways that we can provide some of the support and whether it's sales support or certain types of infrastructure or technology to give it to them so that we can sort of enable what they do. And then, frankly, not to think it's just a one-way street. There's certain things that they've done, and I can talk to you a little bit about this, but there's a particular approach to content and programming and experience that I think we can learn a lot from. And so what we want to do is draw lessons from them. So I think what we're trying to do is make sure that we have a successful integration by, frankly, not thinking like a large company trying to integrate an acquisition, and giving them a lot of space and a lot of freedom to do what they do. And what I meant by the content experience is that for those of you who don't know TechCrunch, what they do is they post a lot of stories during the day. They have a whole staff of writers, and people are writing, publishing articles essentially. And what happens is that the audience will comment immediately as soon as an article is posted. And so by the time a large number of people actually go to the site and read the articles, there's already lots of comments. And so what you realize very quickly is that the comments and the interactions with the audience have become part of the whole experience, have become part of the programming. And the community itself they take ownership over the experience. And so we think it's a very interesting slant and approach to how some of the programming on the web is evolving. Not all of it, but some of it. And lots to learn there. Well,
I mean, and also one of the things that TechCrunch does is they have a conference business. And is that something that you think you might be able to apply to other properties for AOL? I mean, I'm presuming you'll want to continue the conference business for them.
So we're absolutely taking a look at that. I mean, I describe AOL as a start around. We're a turnaround, and the only way I think that we can become truly successful and really redefine who and what AOL is by acting more like a startup. And by that I mean really having more of a humble, open, very flexible approach to trying new things. And I think we have to do that with events and other types of business models. So we'll absolutely look into it.
So, and also, there's other acquisitions that happened, it seemed like they all happened on the same day.
They did. Not of our choosing. Well, sometimes acquisitions take on a life of their own. And so, we were working on them, we're very busy, but they were not necessarily going to be announced on the same day. As it turns out, it turned out fine. But we were working on closing them very closely together.
So you had TechCrunch, 5min Media, and Thing Labs. And talk a little bit about how each of those pieces are fitting into the whole content strategy for AOL.
Right. So TechCrunch I talked about. It's it's a tremendous brand, incredibly loyal, engaged following, doing interesting things, and defining what a content experience can be on the web. Thing Labs is basically a startup with brilliant entrepreneurs who are really recreating and thinking, or redefining, I should say, and thinking about how to make content more social and what that means. And so that team is based in our Palo Alto office and working with our communications offerings as well. And then 5 Minute Media, it's interesting that the preceding presentation was just on video syndication. 5 Minute Media is one of the largest video syndicators on the web. And the reason why that's so interesting is that there's sort of an inbound and an outbound business model they have. So if you have a site today, regardless of your size, and if you're in search of video inventory and content, which most sites are, 5 Minute Media basically allows you to embed a player that has some of the web's best video content on it, and will contextually target and offer your audience's video. And then that's the inbound. On the outbound, what they do is they take your content, your best video content, and syndicate it throughout the web and give you a rev share. So your content can find new audiences, reach, extend the brand, et cetera. So it's a fantastic business, and it absolutely reflects what we're seeing on the web today.
Well, all these companies that you've acquired, I mean, obviously they're new to you guys, but also things like, Engadget, Moviefone, /film/food, these are more known as brands unto themselves. They're not necessarily known as being AOL's Engadget. Is that intentional, or is that something you guys want to change?
I think it's something that we're working through now, frankly. We think that there's an opportunity to redefine what the AOL brand is. And so while we want to give support to these brands, and if you go to any of the sites today, there's absolutely associations to AOL, whether it's in the header or the footer. Yeah. But I think there are going to be different answers for different sites at the end of the day. There will be a connection to AOL, and there's no sort of conscious decision to not connect it with AOL. I think, if anything, we'll probably bring these brands closer to AOL as people begin to understand more and more of what we're trying to do at the company.
So, and what about mobile? I mean, obviously that's got to be a part of any content strategy. Is that something that you feel like is, just the groundwork's already been laid, or is that something that you guys are going to be taking steps toward in the future?
Sure, yeah. We have lots of mobile applications out there, and I think for us, as well as anyone in the content space out there, I mean, mobile it's table stakes now. And I think the attitude that we have, and the thing that I share with my teams is, you really have to program to the platform. You can't cut and paste experiences from one platform or device and put it on another. And I think the challenge for us and everyone out there is to say, well, what is the experience? What is the context for consuming any particular type of content on particular devices? And so that suggests that there are very different experiences between, let's say, a smartphone and a tablet even. Mm-hmm. And so we are doubling down on that, really trying to get smart about what type of experiences will resonate. But that's absolutely an important thing we're thinking about.
So this question goes a little bit back to your days at YouTube, but I'm curious, it's like, how did you convince studios to get their content online? I mean, what was your experiences like back then in terms of, nowadays it's just kind of seen as being a given, as that's part of how you do business. It certainly wasn't the case originally.
No, it was not, definitely not.
So I mean, it's like, did you have people hanging up on you? How bad was it?
There's probably people in the room who I'm sure felt insulted by our first couple of interactions. The traditional media business is built, as everyone knows, on the idea of having carefully prescribed windows of availability, and it's a fantastic business model. It generates billions of dollars, and that's fantastic. The thing about the web is that it's so porous, and you can't stuff that genie back in the bottle. And so what you have to think about, I think, is well, how do you get in front of that? And I think the answer on the web is that it's not just about bringing audiences to where you decide the content is going to be, which is absolutely in your prerogative and something that you should be thinking about, you meaning us and everyone else. But you've got to think about ways to take the content out to where the audiences already are. And YouTube is just one part of that equation. Facebook is just one part of that equation. And that was basically my my pitch, if that's the right word for it, to say,
Sure.
look, you have particular objectives in the content space, we have particular objectives as a business, and there's absolutely complementarity, if that's the right word, in working together here. And I think for those companies that have embraced that, I think they found that to absolutely be the case.
In terms of AOL's position as a content provider, and obviously, as you said, you've got the technology piece that kind of translates to how that content gets out into the world. How do you think that translates to people in terms of what their own skill sets have to be?
It's interesting because we have lots of different types of people. So if you include Patch, which is our local content initiative, we're going to be the largest net hire of journalists this year. In fact, we're going to hire probably close to 500 journalists by the end of the year in 2010. And so we have journalists, we have newsrooms, we have editors, we have programmers, we have producers, all sorts. And so one of the things that I've observed is that, and I come from television. I got my start at NBC years ago, but there are, in traditional media companies, they tend to be mature, and so roles are very well established and well defined. And so you had people who produced the content, you had people who distributed and marketed the content, and then you had people who monetized the content, to oversimplify the process. And in the online world, you have the opportunity, if not the responsibility, frankly, to get your hands involved in all three. So it doesn't matter if you're an individual sort of blogger or you're a Pulitzer Prize-winning writer or an Emmy Award-winning producer. There's an opportunity, is the way I think about it, not just in crafting the content, but thinking about how it can be distributed and how it can get sort of established in the zeitgeist, and then thinking about ways to monetize it by partnering with different folks. And it's wide open. And I think what's going to happen, and it's happening now, is there is a generation of producers. And by generation, I don't mean by age at all. I just mean by people who are just diving in and trying to cut their teeth on how to establish and produce content and get it distributed and get the awareness up, and working with potential sponsors, even as you think about the development process, so that they frankly have ownership over all three of those segments. And I think that's a big shift for how people defined and did their jobs before. But I think for people who have turned the corner on that, there's so much more control and transparency in what you do, and potentially, I think, more rewards. I think that's the next big thing.
How many subscribers does AOL have at this point?
A little less than 5 million, I believe. And
so how does the subscription revenue compare to the advertising revenue?
I am not quite sure on the exact dollars, but it's still a significant chunk of it. And the decline has slowed a little bit over the quarters. And what you find is that there are a lot of people who like the option value of having the dial-up access sometimes when they're traveling or in emergencies. Sometimes people like the client itself and will overlay it on a broadband connection. So they like the interface, and it ain't broke to them.
Right.
And then third, there are folks who, and sometimes when we work in very close circles, paying $50 a month for broadband access is expensive. And if you just answer a few emails, whatever it is, 40, 50, 38.99, whatever it is a lot of money. And so there are definitely people in this country who want to be plugged into the internet and appreciate the opportunity to communicate with folks, but they like the idea of having price points that are more flexible and appeal to them.
So if AOL were to acquire Yahoo, have you given any thought to what that content strategy might look like?
I cannot comment on that. I really can't.
Okay, but what can we look for from AOL, say, like in the next 3 to 6 months? What kind of looking for a bunch more acquisitions? Are we're going to see another flurry of chorus line of acquisitions in about 3 months?
Well, we're very clear on what our strategy is, and we feel very good about our strategy. And I think when we talk about our strategy, people get it, and it's fantastic. There's so many people are supportive and want to work with us. So I think what you should look for is us to just continue to execute maniacally on just making sure that we do it right, that we are good people to work with, good partners to work with, whether you're an advertiser or a content partner. I think we have a history of not necessarily attracting and retaining the best people, and that's something that's really important for us. So we'll do all that, but it's really going to be focused on execution.
Great. David, thank you so much.
Thank you.